Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 10th of November of 2025. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Ukraine. During the previous 24 hours, the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, made a very interesting and probably very funny statement, so let's discuss this statement in detail. Zelensky encourages himself, "I am the only one not afraid of Trump. My relations with Trump is constructive and concrete. I understand that everyone is afraid of Trump, everyone in the world, and that is true. This is the United States of America. They are the leaders. I'm not afraid. We are not a threat to the United States and vice versa. It seems to me that the United States is also our partner, a strategic partner. We should be afraid of enemies, and we and America are not enemies. We are friends. So why should we be afraid of Trump?" So this is the statement of the President of Ukraine, Zelensky. So anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next, because obviously just in the end of the special military operation, we will be able to understand who was the friend and who was the enemy. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction, where the Russians improved their position significantly during the previous 24 hours. And first we're going to talk about the western Zaporizhzhia direction, where the Russians, according to different pro-Russian sources, managed to improve their position significantly. So according to pro-Russian sources, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to outflank the, let's say, the Stepnogorsk citadel. So the Stepnogorsk citadel is a part of the city of Stepnogorsk, which is located in the northern part of the settlement. So I'm talking about this territory. So the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to outflank this territory, and the most important, to block this citadel from supply along the road M18. So this is a very important piece of news, because at the same time the Russians managed to establish complete control over the main supply line that goes in the northeastern direction. Here we can see lots of episodes how Russians were attacking vehicles of the armored forces of Ukraine in this area. The Ukrainians, as you can see, suffered huge losses as a result of these attacks. So it seems that this road is no longer safe for Ukrainians, which means that the Stepnogorsk citadel was caught in cauldron by Russians. So according to these updates, we believe that in coming days, maybe in 1 or 2 weeks, the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from the citadel completely. And if Ukrainians retreat from this territory, the Russians will be able to enter the Zaporizhzhia operational space. And from these positions, the Russians would be able to attack further in the northern direction towards the settlements of Grigorovka and Vestylyanka. And of course, the Russians may try to outflank the city of Orekhov from the west as well. So very interesting situation can start developing in this area after the end of the battle for the settlement of Stepnogorsk. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on the eastern Zaporizhzhia flank. During the previous 24 hours, as you can see, we received lots of interesting changes. We received not just interesting changes, we received huge changes on the ground. So this is the situation by the end of the 8th of November of 2025, and this is exactly the moment when the Russians just finished the battle for the territory of the Uspienovka fortified area. I would like to remind you that on the 7th of November of 2025, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, as well as several pro-Russian sources, published this video where we can see how Russians reported that they managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Stepnogorsk. So based on this video, on the 7th of November, we adjusted the map, and telling the truth, I expected that it would take 2 or 3 or 5 days for Russians to regroup themselves, to bring fresh forces, to bring additional arms before moving further in the southwestern direction. But the Russians, as we can see, finished everything much faster. And by the end of the 9th of November of 2025, we received lots of updates that Russians, first of all, managed to answer the eastern part of the settlement by the name of Solotka. Furthermore, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the fields between Novouspienovska, Poltavka, and Uspienovka itself, and the most important, the Russians secured the territory of the settlement of Rybne. As for this small village, by the end of the 9th of November, we had the video, this one, where we can see how exactly Russians were fighting for the territory, and we can see lots of episodes when Russians were raising their flags. So this is the situation by the end of the 9th of November. Once again, even yesterday in the evening, I thought that Ukrainians would try to show at least some resistance in the this area, but nothing happened. The Russians managed to break through Ukraine defense and to capture the settlement of Salotka and the settlement of Nova. So these territories were captured. Furthermore, as you can see, according to this configuration of the map, the Russians also managed to encircle the settlement of Novospenovskaya. And furthermore, this is not just changes on the ground that were confirmed or provided just by different mappers. This is the reality on the ground that was also confirmed by this video that was published by the Group of Forces East. And in this video, we can see how exactly the clashes for this territory were taking place. The Russians, as you can see, were reducing the territory of these settlements to ruins. And in the final part of this video, we can see probably tens of episodes of how Russians were raising their flag in different parts of these territories. So once again, based on this update, we have adjusted the map. This is the situation by the end of the 8th of November of 2025, and this is already the situation by the end of the 10th of November. The Russians are advancing, and furthermore, and this is also a very important piece of news, the Russians managed to capture these villages that we've just discussed, and furthermore, the Russians managed to move even further. As you can see, pro-Ukraine sources adjusted their maps, and according to these changes, the Russians, after the end of the battle for the settlements of Salotka and Nova, managed to improve their positions and to answer the villages of Rovnopolye and to improve their positions around Novospinovskaya. So it seems that Russians would be able to secure this territory, this corner, within the next 5 or 7 days and to capture everything most likely along this red line. And as soon as the Russians are able to finish this, they will continue offensive operation further, and this time they will attack the city of Guliai-Polye itself, because after the end of the battle for this small foothold, Russians will face no resistance and no barriers in front of them. The city of Guliai-Polye is going to be the next stop for the Russians. So they're moving very fast, and they're moving faster and faster and faster. Now let's talk about the settlement of Velika Mikhailovka, another important area. During the previous 48 hours, we received lots of interesting updates from this territory. By the end of the 7th of November, this is the map right now in front of your screens, and by the end of the 8th of November, the Russians, according to different sources, managed to secure the settlement by the name of Volcha. This video was published also by the Group of Forces East and confirmed by the Minister of Defense. And the thing is that this is another direction where the Russians decided not to stop, but to continue moving further. And by the end of the 9th of November, we received first reports published by pro-Russian sources that Russians began advancing in the direction of Aristopol. As you can see, the settlement of Aristopol is located on the Russian side of the river of Volcha. The bridges in this area were destroyed a long time ago. Ukrainians currently have no chances to bring additional forces to the south because it's going to be very difficult. So, and today we got this map that was published by a pro-Ukrainian source. And as you can see, according to this map, the Russians managed to establish control, or at least the Russians were discovered or spotted on at least more than 50% of the settlement of Aristopol. So the entire western and the southwestern parts of the village is are already colored as a gray zone, so which means that the Russians are there and they're trying to dig in deeper and to force the Ukrainians to fall back. If everything continues the same way, obviously within the next 3 days or within the next 5 days, everything along this red line would be captured by Russians. And it seems that the Russians are not planning to stop with this, because they have already begun bombing the settlement of Velika Mikhailovka with all types of caliber they have. In this video, we can see attacks on positions of downward force to Ukraine with FABs, lots of explosions, lots of destructions were recorded. It seems that it's not just attacks, it's something like artillery or aviation preparation. And most likely after the end of the battle, the Russians will try to cross the river of Volcha with the purpose to secure the village of Velika Mikhailovka, which is going to be a complete disaster for the armed force of Ukraine, because Ukraine can lose 2 settlements in this direction, Velika Mikhailovka and Guliai-Polye, at the same time. And then I'm not even sure who can predict the further development of the situation on the ground. Now let's talk about the Pokrovsk direction. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very interesting updates from this area. And the most important one is that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Hnatovka. The clashes for this territory have been taking place for more than 2 or 3 weeks. The Russians reported that they began clearing operation in this area at the same day when the Russians announced the creation of Cauldron in this area. So the clashes were very heavy. As you can see, the buildings were almost reduced to ruins. Almost every single building was damaged and almost destroyed. And in this video we can see how Russians raised their flags in this area. So based on this report, based on the report of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, we haven't adjusted anything because the village of Hnatovka was colored by different mappers long time ago, almost a week or two ago. This village was colored based on the videos we got. But all these days the Russians were securing this territory, and just now they finished the situation. So most likely Russians will continue offensive, and most likely Russians now are tasked to finish the battle for the settlement of Rog, and after the village of Rog, I believe that Russians will announce the complete securing of the territory of the city of Pokrovsk. Furthermore, different neutral mappers specified and clarified the situation along the, let's say, city limits. The Russians, according to neutral mappers, by the end of the 10th of November of 2025, secured the city of Pokrovsk for more than 95%. Ukrainians control just this part along the Kostybinskovo street, and probably this is a cemetery, or probably this is a residential area. So these blocks, this small micro district between the northern part of the city of Pokrovsk and the Olympiyska street is the only area under complete Ukrainian control, which most likely could be secured also in coming hours. Furthermore, the Russians improved their positions to the north of the settlement of Mirnograd. So we see that the Russians are tightening the news around Ukrainian positions. As we discussed in the previous videos, the Russians are tasked to encircle Ukrainians, to block them, and to propose them negotiations, and of course to propose them surrender. I'm not sure whether this is going to happen or not. The Ukrainian authorities, military authorities, are not interested in this. Furthermore, according to information we have, according to Syrsky, the situation is stable, the situation is difficult but stable, and that the Russians are not, let's say, winning, according to Syrsky. So anyway, let's wait and see. Now let's talk about the Shakhovo pocket and the northeastern part of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. During the previous 24 hours, as you can see, we received huge changes, and they are very important. The first update is coming from the territory to the south of the Zaporizhzhia. In this video, we can see how Russians were bombing positions of the armed forces of Ukraine along this tree line. This is a very important video because this video confirms that most likely these territories are under complete control of the armed forces of Ukraine. So I would like to remind you that according to the map of the 9th of November of 2025, these territories is to be considered as a gray zone because many mappers before adjusted these territories under control of Ukraine. And now we received a first proof. So this is the first proof that Russians indeed lost control over the territories and were forced to fall back. Another important update is coming from the Shakhovo pocket. Today, different sources published, pro-Russian sources, the video from the northeastern part of the settlement of Shakhovo. And here we might see how Russians were securing the territory of the settlement in this area. We will not watch the video due to a significant number of casualties and violence, but this video is a very important proof that Russians control the most northeastern part. And we got reports that the Russians still control the northwestern part, so which means that this village of Shakhovo is encircled by Russians, but Ukrainians refuse to fall back from this territory. So it seems that the village of Shakhovo could be captured also by Russians, and with the fall of the settlement of Shakhovo, the Russians will be able to resolve most of their questions and problems in this area. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the central, in the Konstantinovka direction. During the previous 24 hours, we received several reports. According to them, the Ukrainians counterattacked in the area of the city of Chasiv Yar, and as a result of counteroffensive, Ukrainians managed to restore control over this part. So this information was provided by neutral mappers, but a few days ago, there was a video of how Russians were attacking this territory with FPV drones. So based on this video, we came to the conclusion that most likely there are still Ukrainians that are encircled by Russians, so we added this pocket as encirclement for the armed forces of Ukraine. But today, neutral mappers reported that Ukrainians indeed counterattacked, but we are waiting. We prefer to wait for additional updates and additional clarifications. So it seems that maybe indeed the Ukrainians launched counteroffensive in the city of Chasiv Yar just to distract Russian attention and to probably reduce the pressure of Russians on some other front line. As for the Liman-Kupiansk direction, during the previous 24 hours, nothing special was recorded. The only report we got from the area of the river of Nitrius, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians improved their positions further to the west of the river of Nitrius and captured several tree lines. So this is a very important progress on the ground. As for the city of Kupiansk, the situation is the same. The Ukrainians are trying to escape this cauldron, but the Russians control the situation and they destroy everything with FPV drones. So Ukraine doesn't have any chances for successful evacuation. So the news is tightening, as you can see. And today, by the end of the 10th of November, several pro-Russian sources improved positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation along N26 road. So according to several pro-Russian sources, everything to the north of this road is already in the complete Russian control, which means that Ukrainians currently control just around 20 or 25% of the city of Kupiansk, and they're losing even these positions. As for the Volchansk direction, during the previous 24 hours, we also received lots of changes. So the Russians began their major and most likely their decisive and final offensive operation in this direction with the purpose to secure the city of Volchansk completely and to answer the T-29-20A-104 road. So this is the situation by the end of the 4th of November, and this is approximately the moment when Russians launched their major offensive. And during these days, the Russians were improving their positions significantly. As you can see, they managed to cut this territory first in two pieces, and now the Russians are focused to secure the southern part of the city of Volchansk, so they're moving in this direction. As soon as Russians establish control over the territory, they will be able to answer the Kharkiv operational space, and then the Russians can move in the direction of Bely Kolodezh, and Russians can advance further in the northeastern direction with the purpose to take under control these territories as well. So the Russians, when they enter the operational space, will have lots of options where to move further. And that's it for the short for today. Military Summary channel reminds to we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.